There we go.
Yeah.
Well, welcome everyone on this Sunday, February. It's February. Today we're going to talk about mending and why it matters, and just a little intro to mending, and then we can all talk about mending. So Kirsten and I have a little intro, and then we will talk about what we're mending and what when mending means to us. I am going to share my screen. Practice this movement well. Yes. How are we doing? Can you see it?
Yep.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about why mending matters. So we start off with what is mending, really. And we all know mending, but the definition of mending is the act of repairing clothes with imperfections from well-worn holes, stains, tears, missing buttons, etc. And it's really about embracing that beauty of imperfections. It's not a perfect garment anymore. It's not, even if it was, and embracing that. And fixing something that you already have and extending its life. Also can be about adding character to garments. It can be changing into something new and adding character. Mending is actually a historic practice. I mean, all of our relatives and our families did a lot of mending out of necessity. The earliest humans pieced together animal skins repeatedly for garments. This is a great example of over 1,000-year-old Egyptian piece. And they've been able to determine that it was originally an adult garment, which was mended and then handed down to a child and continued to be mended. And like all over the world, everyone had textiles were rare and everything got used in mending. Sometimes the mending is used in a beautiful way too. The Japanese shishiko, which means little stabs, used it to bolster the strength of their homespun fabrics and make patchwork fabrics were boro, and that's repurposed and refashioned cloth. And a lot of the marks were individual to the makers. And a picture of men wearing the shishiko and boro fabric. In Victorian times, they would rework dresses, do mending. There was a great find of the girls' own paper. It was for young girls about their first needlework in mending and reworking. We know a lot of these numbers, but I always find them compelling to go through some of the impacts of fast fashion and throwaway garments on the environment. Fast fashion generates more CO2 than aviation and shipping, 2.3 billion tons of CO2. 10 to 20% of the pesticide use globally is linked to textile production, which always surprises me. 20% of the global water waste is fashion-based. That's 200 tons of water for each 1 ton of dyed fabric. And this was a stat that I found that I didn't know. 16 out of 21 clothing items are returned from online shopping. So every time you go shopping, 16 out of 21 of them are destroyed or left in warehouses. They're not reused. So people think they buy these things, send them back, and they'll get reused. The majority of them are destroyed and not reused and go into landfills. Or a lot of them are actually exported to Africa where they're shredded. They have a very negative impact on the infrastructure and environment there too. A little more. Every second, the equivalent of 1 garbage truck of textiles is burned or buried in landfills. 3 out of 5 garments end up in landfills within 1 year of purchase, which I think that's not as much of the people on this call, but it's still an astonishing number to me, how much garments and textiles end up in landfills. Talking a little bit about the importance of mending our clothes. It's a step away from that mindset of consumption. It's a way to fight against that fast fashion and that waste. The simplest solution to the waste of fast fashion is just reducing our consumption, like caring and rewearing what we have. That's really the biggest impact we can have on an individual basis, as opposed to using and tossing. Is just to care and rewear, fix things, mend them. There's a lot of artists that actually brought attention to this. Acts of resistance, such as buy nothing groups, people buy nothing for a year without purchase. There's artist representation of paying attention to this movement of mending and buying less. Thoughts about mending is, we mend because we can't afford to add to the textile pollution or landfills. We choose not to. We choose that we don't want to add to that. Mending allows us to slow down and be mindful of our textile choices and connect with the clothing we do have. And while some may mend out of necessity, some may not, and not everybody has the privilege of time to mend and how it applies. So we really want to encourage that mending become accessible and celebrated and something we value.
So we thought we'd look at some different types of mending. And we began with just looking at visible mending and invisible mending, and they both use a lot of the same skills, but they have different aims. And visible mending really is a sort of a deliberate, or it's actually not, it's a space in which we can, sort of create our own artistic expression and move away from trying to do anything with great perfection, but actually bring something new. And invisible mending is usually done when we don't want the mend to stand out and we want the garment to look pretty much as close to the original way that it looked as possible. So those are sort of the two streams of mending that we tend to go down. So invisible mending, we have some examples, like a repair where you're stitching or reattaching the parts that have come undone. Sometimes we work with darning. There's a couple of darning pictures on the right there. And these are very careful choices in invisible mending to maybe blend with the colors of your piece. And I like this blue piece of mending where you can see the needle is weaving the actual, a new strand back into the actual architecture of the work. And maybe if you looked really carefully, it might, be visible, but from, a distance, you wouldn't notice it. And we also use patches to mend a garment and give it more strength. And it can be invisible if it's behind and has stitches that match the fabric. And some examples of visible mending, we looked at this sashiko, this Japanese technique using small repetitive stitches, and often the designs are based on elements from the natural world. Boro is another artful means of attaching and stacking tattered pieces to reconstruct a garment, and kantha from India and Bangladesh, another form of quilting through layering of old cloths and embroidering to bring them together. And embroidery is often used like decorative embroidery to cover a hole, or not even to cover the hole, but to to clean up the hole so that it doesn't actually keep growing larger and larger through use. Patches we use, and reverse applique, which is when you put layers of fabric and cut away the top layer, and you can expose a contrasting color beneath. And darning, again, here we could use darning as actually a little contrast to the work, and not not sort of the aim not being to make it blend, but to make it stand out. So so you can see there's like a lot of all of these techniques essentially can be used for visible or invisible, really. But yeah. So these are some examples of visible mending. On the left, this is an artist, Celia Prim, who her work really picks up on the themes that sort of are implicit and implied in this work of mending. She mends clothing from that people give to her, and she uses, again, this is a very visible, intentional sort of shift, and she works with ideas of about memory and biography and history of the people that wore these clothing, and sort of brings that element of the people that wear the clothing, sort of inform the meaning of the cloth itself. And on the right, This is Katarina Radebau, and she's written a few books on mending, which are quite useful. And here you can see this like beautiful expression of creative expression of making in all of these wonderful patches. And she's, borrowing and inspired by sashiko traditions from Japan. In these, in some of these patches, you can clearly see some of that work. So these are almost iconic. I feel like a lot of people know her work, and when we see those jeans, hopefully they're an inspiration. So mending can be as simple as replacing a button. And, it's something that some of us know how to do. Some of us, might need a tutorial, but we have, these days we have access to an amazing wealth of online tutorials and books and all sorts of things. So it's just nice to see a sort of straightforward plan if you've never actually, sewn on a button. How do you measure where the button is going to go, and how do you work with the cross stitch and everything to fix your button and get the right balance? So there are some sort of rules of the road in a way. These are some examples of mending knitted fabric. On the left, this is a lovely sort of idea just to pick up around the edge of a hole in a knitted piece with crochet and crochet the hole closed. And on the right, it's a knitted patch affixed to a piece of knitting. And it gives it, because knitting needs to actually move and breathe with our body. So actually bringing a knitted patch to a sweater or something is a nice solution. And those are examples from a book called Mending Life, which at the end will give you all these resources. These are some examples of mending knitted pieces. On the left is a sock, and then there's two slides of the finger of a glove. And I love this way of repairing knitting. It's you create a little. You're creating a little loom. You create the warp threads built right into the fabric, and then you fill in with your weft. And this can be quite playful. Here you can see these are examples from Katrina Radebau's book, and she's intentionally chosen colors that stand out and make that hole visible, which is just kind of beautiful because the hole appears because it's been worn by the wearer, and you're sort of drawing attention to this history too.
Sorry.
And this is a slide, a couple of examples of Swiss mending, which you saw in the slide by Celia Prim, the mended sweater by Celia Prim. I think Swiss mending can be, it's also called duplicate stitch. It can be a little bit, it's not an easy stitch to learn. So sometimes it can feel a little intimidating to jump in and learn the stitch. And I have to say, it's nice to learn on a scratch piece of knitting, or a piece of knitting in which the structure of the knitting is still visible, because you're essentially following the path of your knitting. And so if you notice like a garment that's starting to get weak, a knitted garment that's starting to lose its strength and structure, it's a good idea to work with following the structure of your knitting and do it before you get a hole. But it's very satisfying if you learn how to do it. It's very rhythmic and satisfying. So I always think with mending, it's nice to have kind of a vocabulary of stitches, everything from like a running stitch to a buttonhole stitch or a blanket stitch. I think it makes our practice more comfortable, and it gives us the opportunity to sort of approach it in a more of a meditational sort of way. On the left is a little it's a seed stitch, and it was used to cover a stain. The middle slide is showing it's a blank, sorry, the blanket stitch or buttonhole stitch, and and again, it was just, you know, a fun way to affix a patch. So, and then there's a chain stitch on the far right that was used to cover a stain in a fabric. Yeah, this is just picking up on that idea that mending has the potential to be meditative and mindful, and it's one of those things that can really be quite centering and can connect us to the history of the garment and the maker. And I think when we think about the language of mending, I think that really there's no accident that all of the same language can be used when we're talking about mending a relationship to the earth, to our clothing, to so many aspects. But I do think mending, the very act of it, helps us to sort of drop into this place where we're really thinking about our cloth and the importance of our cloth and our clothing as our second skin, and something that is to be celebrated and honored. And it's kind of like mending, the very act of mending is a gift, you know, to the earth and to ourselves and to the makers. So, yeah. Yeah, I think it's just, this is just a little, in a way, I think patience is an important part of mending, especially if you don't have a lot of experience. I know most of us on this call have some experience with mending, but just starting out can be a little intimidating. And I think it's important just to understand that, you know, your first steps are your first steps, and it gets easier. And eventually, I think one finds incredible freedom in being quite expressive and artistic in the process of mending. So I think, you know, one of the essential parts of having fun in mending is having a nice toolkit, I would say. And so that's on our list of where do we get started. Developing a toolkit, making time. Often we say, I don't have time for that, but actually setting a time in your schedule when you can sit down and mend and be generous with yourself, and yeah, give yourself that time is very fulfilling. And then, as I said, we have so many lovely, inspiring books out there and video links, and of course, Friends with Knowledge. That's also very nice. So here's some ideas just for what you might want in your basic toolkit. Fabric scissors, a large pair of shears and small snips, a generous selection of threads and assorted colors, a small ruler, cloth tape measure, darning tools, something, you know, I didn't mention, but a darning egg or something, especially if you're working with a sock or a glove where you don't want to accidentally stitch through to the other side and make it impossible to wear that item again. Fabric pens and pencils are nice, and of course straight pins, scraps of fabric. And I'll mention here on this slide something I didn't put in here, but I think when we're thinking about our threads, our natural fiber threads that hopefully we're using, and our scraps of fabric. One of the sort of really nice practice to include if you're especially working with, well, even matching, invisible or visible, to think about using plant dyes and to work with maybe some of the plants in your area to over dye some of your threads and have those to work with. It can be a really connecting practice. So yeah, connecting you both to that activity and to the place in which you're working. Yeah, so here this list probably could be pages and pages. And if you have other ideas for mending books that you don't see on this list, please feel free to share them. We have these resources up on our webpage too. So on the Chesapeake Fibershed webpage. Yeah. And here are some great online resources.
And I'll share too that when Kirsten and I were talking about this, I saying that, you know, whenever I'm looking for a new technique, the first thing I do is Google it, and there's always a YouTube video of somebody doing it. And so one of the best ways to learn too is just, you know, we could share again 100, 200 resources here, but I often find if I just Google, you know, how to do something, someone will show you how to do it. Someone's out there doing it online, and watch a couple of those and you kind of can get the gist of it.
Yeah, so Nancy, do you want to talk to this one?
Yeah. So I guess, you know, we're sort of in the presentation kind of talking, you know, the last meeting we talked about doing a closet survey inventory, and we just wanted to open up for questions, like, you know, start thinking, you know, have people talk about what did you learn and how did it feel? What was your experience? Did emotions come up as you went through your clothing? And have you made any changes in how you view your closet? So I'm going to stop sharing and open up for conversation about mending and closets and where we are.
Yeah.
Anyone want to share their experience in going through their closets and looking at their clothes?
I will.
Good.
I thought, oh, this is going to be easy. There's only like 3, you know, what is it, 8 questions or something? It was really hard. And it was surprising to me because I don't buy a lot of clothing, but I have a lot. So it was to me about how much I have, and again, what do I want to do with it? How much of it am I actually wearing? That kind of thing.
I think I told you guys that I kind of went through and did a closet clean out a year ago for good reasons. I lost quite a bit of weight, and so a lot of clothes, many of which were gifted to me from my older sister. Unfortunately, she's gaining weight, and while she buys clothing from largely sustainable sources, she couldn't fit into them, and she gave me just a ton of clothes. They were lovely, but then when I lost the weight, they really didn't fit me. So my joy since we met last time was that I am an adult advisor for a group of teenagers, middle schoolers and teenagers at our church. And one of them came up to me all excited because through her theater group, she had been exposed to the concept of working against fast fashion and redoing her clothing. And before she could get the words fast fashion, I'd said, oh my goodness, you learned about fast fashion. And another young person in the group also said, yeah, it's really frustrating because my favorite stores, I'm finding out they've been greenwashing. They are not as green as they say they are. And I said, you know, I don't sew, but I have a whole pile of clothes. Would you guys like to go through them and see if you want to figure out how to redo them? And one of them did. She took a whole bunch of stuff that my sister knit, stuff that she had spun and knit, but also some other clothing. And so I don't know how many, I'm in Montgomery County. I'm not the person to teach them how to sew. I just took a class to learn how to relearn my embroidery stitches. I would love to offer to them a chance for them to learn these skills, which for their generation, we're talking about kids who are 14. This is way outside of what is presented to them as something they ought to learn how to do. So that, you know, I was just thrilled that they were aware of the issue and they're willing to take it on and do something about it. So
great.
That's amazing. How exciting. Thank God for the younger generation, right? So my key takeaway from analyzing my closet was that I have 2 completely different wardrobes. One of which is for me putzing around the house and gardening and is like just darned to death. And the other one is my work wardrobe for when I have to actually show up in person or I'm with a client. And those 2 are completely different sets. So when I was looking at the stuff that I buy for work, yes, it's usually more organic cotton. Yes, I'm trying to choose actually ethical places, but the pressure to have something that is new and it does not have any stains on it, does not have any holes in it, is pretty strong. So I'm still meditating on whether there's a way to do visible mending or even a better job at invisible mending to give my professional wardrobe a longer life. But it was really telling how starkly different my everyday clothes versus my work specific clothes are.
I can relate.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And I think, it's something where, I don't know, we're struggling with still is like, what we present in this sort of, more formal situation and why we have to present in a certain way. It's such it's complicated in our country and in every, it's different, it's nuanced, there's a lot to it, but yeah, making those decisions, or starting to make different decisions is kind of part of it, I think, too, for all of us. Yeah.
Well, I've never had a lot of clothes, and but I always thought that as a stay-at-home mom for a long time, you don't need to get dressed up to go, but something to wear to church or something. But I always made sure I had a summer Marion or Barian dress and a winter Marion or Barian dress. If you go to a wedding or a funeral, that's what you wear. So I call it my Marion or Barian dress. And but I've always sewn my clothes as an adult. I learned to use a sewing machine when I was 11, and so I know I'm really the oddball of a whole bunch of people, but mending is just something I always did, and especially if you sew your clothes, you're not going to ditch them, make them last.
Kathy, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, I keep hearing things that I'm like, oh, me too, me too. I retired from the military a dozen years ago, almost now, and I had the distinctly work clothes and play clothes, and I don't feel like I buy a lot of clothes, but I looked in my closet and I have over 30 blouses that are all cotton and linen, and I don't they're all thrifted, also most of them. And the only one that I couldn't find a tag in was the one I got from Wild Fibers at a festival. It didn't, she told me what she thought it was made from, so I'm guessing that's what it was, but it didn't say where it was made, which I'm sure she told me, but there wasn't any information in the shirt. All the other ones were telling me where they were made, which was primarily Asia. I did come across one, which I should have made a better note, was here in the, it was US. Oh, the fresh produce, they imported fibers, but so cotton, but they would construct them here, and make, sew them here. So yeah, that was my big thing. It's like, I don't remember buying new clothes for a very long time, but apparently I don't let go of them either. So that was, and yeah, I'm a little hard on them. So you've seen some of my mending before. It's a little rough, but it gets the job done. That's all.
Thank you. Well, I'll share one of the experiences I had, and I think at future, it's kind of a future topic, but one of the things I came up with was clothes that I really love, but then also I had a lot of clothes in my closet that are not natural fibers and are not particularly well made. They are fast fashion. And I'm looking at them like, what do I do with them? I have them here and I occasionally wear them. What do I do with them? And so I think that's a future topic, but that was something that kind of hit me, of like having things in the closet that I don't wear, but I'm not sure. But sometimes I might need that, like, again, like a work thing. I'm like, well, that's something I actually do wear. Like, I have to go to a formal work event, I might throw on that, synthetic shirt because it looks professional. But so, and I hope we can think about that, and other people have that situation. Like, what do you do with these things that, aren't so earth friendly. I don't really want to throw them in a landfill, you know, use the way to use it now. And the other thing I had come up with, I've had this come up over the years, is sort of emotions around clothes, of clothes that, you know, my body's a different size now than it used to be, or as Cindy was alluding to, I was a stay-at-home mom for a long time, and then and during that period, I found a box of my old professional clothes, and looking, they were sort of out of style, and I wasn't wearing them. But it was awful. It was hard to get rid of them. It was hard sort of letting go of that. This is somebody I used to be, and those clothes represented a part of my life. I didn't really, but I also realized I'm not using them. I'm not wearing them. Somebody else might be able to use them. But I find when I go through my clothing, I have a lot of emotions come up. Maybe that's just me, but I can find it a very emotional process.
Definitely relate. I see
You're
Peg-
not
Yeah,
alone.
yeah,
Let's
yeah.
just say that. Everybody
I
send
think
her
we
a
would
hug.
all raise our hands.
Yes.
Peggy, I see your hand is up.
Hi. I was just going to say, I don't think I've heard a comment yet that I don't connect with, and I feel all of the things that everyone's saying. I think I'd say a large part of thinking about different types of wardrobes and the idea that and that's something that I think I've become much more aware of recently, is that like someone was saying earlier, I think Lenore, that work clothes tend to be non-sustainable materials, I think, because we don't have to iron them, and they stay, you know, kind of wrinkle free throughout the day. And that's something that I'm becoming much more aware of, is how do I not purchase those, but also where do they go when I'm done with them? And how do I not become done with them? I'll just keep them forever if need be, which is another issue. But I will say that another thing that I have found is that generally I thrift, and I often pick up things thinking, oh, I will mend this and alter this and change this, and I will wear it because I'm going to love it when I've done that, and then I haven't done it. So that's what a lot of the things sitting around my house are things that it just needs this one little, like I need to add some fun buttons, or, but I gathered recently with some good friends, Kirsten being one of them, for Mending Day. And I can't tell you how fantastic it was to get together and actually pull out the sweaters that I wanted to mend and the different things. And we sat down, and for a couple of hours, we sat and mended together. So I will just kind of promote that idea of finding a couple of people. It was just one kind of Saturday afternoon for a couple of hours. But I really did get things accomplished, and it's kind of pushed me to want to continue doing it. So just a shout out to that idea.
Lovely. Pamela, I see your hands up.
Hi. So there are two things that sort of came up for me when I was doing the inventory. And the first one was that a lot of my clothes are really old, but in very good shape. And some of them are very old and not necessarily in good shape, but I repair them. I've been mending for a really, really long time. The thing that was even more surprising than the age of most of the stuff that I have, though, is that taking an item and looking at it and thinking, so I'm using this now, and this is how I could repair it, but then what could I use it for, when I can no longer use it? And some of the things that came up for me were, repurposing for a grandchild. I make books, so book covers, and I have actually had some linen pants that they really just were beyond repair, and I used the legs to make book cloth and several book covers. But it's just interesting to think about it before the item is actually at that point. So that was kind of interesting. And one thing I wanted to mention was I have a huge mending pile. I always do. I just gradually work through things. But one thing I started to do was to pull the threads that I would use. I do a lot of invisible mending. And so I'll use sewing thread on like fine gauge sweaters and or sometimes embroidery floss if I'm getting a closer match with that. So I just decided to pull threads and put them with the items so that if I have a few minutes, then I don't have to go searching and trying to match things up. So yeah, that's a good idea.
It's a great idea, because I know that's sometimes it's that hump of getting over where is everything, getting started.
I have also quilted, and the thing is about using old clothes, if you keep your quilt for a really long time, that fabric might be the first stuff that wears out if it was already old and used before you put it in a quilt. And I can't throw textiles away. So, I wasn't home all the time. I did work out away from home, but never in an office. I was teaching at the community college, but sustainable agriculture classes, so I could wear jeans and shirts and sweater, just casual stuff. But I can't throw textiles away, so I'd save, old pants, my husband's old khaki pants and button-down shirts. And I have a big loom now. We've made as Christmas gifts for our kids. We've made woven placemats like you would make rag rugs by cutting up all the shirts. And this Christmas, they all got a kitchen rug made with like the khaki pant weight fabric. So that's one way of getting rid of some of your stuff. And if you don't weave, you could knit it or crochet, cut the stuff in strips and knit and crochet and make those things.
Ellen, is your hand up?
I was just responding to what Nancy said earlier about having some synthetic clothes and what to do with them. And I thought, well, that's a good question because I've got a big like tunic-like top that I used to wear. But while you were talking about Nancy, I'd never thought of it before, but I suddenly thought this polyester top would probably make an excellent reusable shopping bag. And yeah, my reusable, I have a few canvas reusable shopping bags, but I also have quite a few that I've been given or somehow, and they're made of synthetic. And so I just wanted to say, I think I'm going to try that with that shirt, which I don't wear anymore, and just see if I can sew it into a simple grocery carrier. Anyway, that's all I have.
I think when I'm still going through my closet and doing the inventory, but the biggest thing for me is that I was noticing I also have like 2 or 3 completely different wardrobes. And I've just recently started working in an office, so I don't really have that many office clothes, but I have a lot of t-shirts, a lot of jeans, because that's what I was wearing in school. And like, I don't really have a reason to wear shorts anymore, but I have a lot of pairs of like bright pink shorts that I'm never going to have a reason to wear. So trying to figure out a way that I can use those. Yeah, I think I'm kind of at a different stage. I'm 24, so I think I'm kind of at a different stage of life than a lot of people where I'm just starting my career and I'm kind of getting rid of a lot of my play clothes right now. And it seems like a lot of people are like rediscovering play clothes. And gosh, I want to be at that in that same place. But
they're different sizes though. They're not,
yeah,
we can't
yeah,
fit in our play clothes from when we were 24.
But that's a very nice thought though.
Yeah, but it's tough to want to like acquire good quality office wear that also works as, stuff I can hike in, stuff I can garden in, stuff I can run in, without spending a ton of money and not buy a whole lot of polyester. So it's like, I have a lot of things I want to do and a lot of things I want to get rid of. And I don't see a way where I can turn the stuff that I have into the stuff that I want, because t-shirts don't become silk. Oh, and I also wanted to say, Margot, I've been sewing for a really long time. So I'm in Gaithersburg, so I am happy to help teach kids how to sew.
You're in Gaithersburg? So I was going to say, one of the ways first to address your situation that's a little different than many of us on this call is that some of us may have clothing that with some alteration would be adequate office clothes for you.
If we're doing a clothing swap, I will happily take everybody's old office wear.
Clothes, and some of it is business wear, because I retired from having to be in an office, and even the office I was in, we had pretty relaxed dress code. So I have been happily like not needing to have 2 wardrobes, other than my really trashy ripped up clothes become my paint clothes because I'm a artist also. But I would love to like give you things that would work for you, and then it means so much more when you're working with teenagers for them to get instruction from young adults rather than from people who are old enough to be their grandmother. It really does. And so I would love to connect absolutely and
great.
work on that. Yeah.
That is a great segue, because one of the things we wanted to remind everybody is we have started a listserv. And so if you're not on the listserv, please join. And there's been some nice communications on that. And since we're approaching 3:45, we just turned 3:45, we want to be honor everyone's time today, because we know a lot of people have family commitments or social gatherings this evening to get to. Just want to remind everyone that our next Zoom session will be March 17th. And as we've been talking about, the topic there is really avoiding the landfills, what to do with unwanted clothes. Between then and now, on March 9th, we are doing we're co-sponsoring with Waterford Craft School. It's a class called New to You, A Guide to Finding Quality Textiles in the Resale Market. It's going to be an all-day seminar, which the morning will be like a classroom lecture from the Waterford teachers, and then the afternoon we'll be going to thrift stores as a team, while kind of people guiding, going as groups of, what can you, kind of guiding and helping, looking through the clothes of what you're looking for, what looking with somebody else and saying, hey, will this work, will this not work, things you want to avoid, things you might be excited about. So those are some upcoming things to look forward to. And you can go to the Waterford Craft School and sign up for that on their website. We're also co-sponsoring with them later. The date is, let me get it right, April 28th, an actual mending workshop of how to actually mend. It'll be with thread and cloth and learning how to physically mend. So that's on their website too.
So can I show something?
Yes.
Okay, so I got my project all ready for November. And I meant to do it last year. This is a coat. I bought a pea coat, a heavy wool pea coat, in January of 1970 when I was a freshman at Ohio State. And I spent my own money, and I didn't have much money. And this has been a great coat. It was one of his favorite coat. And anyway, but I probably haven't worn it for the last 25 years. It was all worn. The sleeves are raggedy on the ends, and the lining has been repaired from many times. Anyways, hanging in my closet, and it didn't even look good enough like to put into Goodwill if I even wanted to get rid of it. So I've been wanting to do something with it, and I needed a new lining. So this involved three things of clothes: an old denim skirt that I'd worn for about 15 years that I had made, slight weight denim. That became the new lining, and it just happened that the pockets in that skirt fit the pocket openings in the jacket. So it has new pockets. And to do the lining, I had to take off the buttons, and it was double-breasted. So I had two rows of buttons, and this coat had 2 rows of buttonholes. You could button up from either side. So obviously one side was well worn and the other side was pristine. And I had taken off the buttons. And when I was trying it on, I realized, I don't need it double-breasted, and I could just sew up the buttonholes I've used all the years and sew a button on the top of each one that gives me a little more room in the body, and just have, single row of buttons. And I took off the collar, and I had another old a tan wool jacket I'd made my husband years before, and that made the hood. So it now has a hood on it, and the bottom of the sleeves are raggedy. So that stuff went on the bottom of the sleeves, and then I used made a little fashionable thing there and put the extra buttons on there. So it got rid of I'm wearing the coat now, and it got rid of that skirt and that other jacket, and I'm loving it. It's over 50 years old.
That's great. So inspirational.
Mhm. Well, I hope you make something else before November. I'm sure you will. But even if you don't,
I'm always doing that stuff.
Yeah,
that's just the way I live. So
that's what you do. Yeah.
Fibershed, yeah.
It is great inspiration for the rest of us, at least for me.
Indeed.
So thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Well, it's great to see everyone. And
Just have one more thing to say, just
Yeah.
another thing about the listserv. So we've sent you out invitations to join it. It's with IO groups. If you don't think that you got it, check your junk mail or your spam folders. And I'll probably send it out another one as well. So just kind of be looking for that. And it's a great place for Raisa and Margot to connect about, you know, the sewing and all that kind of stuff. We can talk about trades and everything. It's going to be a great place for us to share what we're doing.
Akumi, who couldn't come today, shared some mending pictures. That's fun. If you saw those today. Great.
Yes.
Everybody have a great Sunday, and we will talk soon. We'll see some of you on the 9th and on the 17th. Bye, everybody.
Great.
Bye,
Thank you so
take
much.
care.
Bye.